The long and winding road finally came to an end for Reading FC on Wednesday night of all nights, and it is 14th position, pending appeal for Wigan that is, that Reading ended up in the Championship this season. About 11 months ago, we kicked off thinking, a mid-table finish wouldn't be too bad this year, and here it is. We can have our cake and eat it. Welcome to the Tilehurst podcast, episode 231, and at long last, the final one of the season, or the season proper, should we say. And your host, Marc Mayo, is joined this week by Olly Allen. How is it going, mate?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm buoyed by the news of our first signing of the summer, about an hour before we're recording this. Josh Lawrence is a Royal, which I'm not too sure what to think about just yet, but it's something to get excited about and a new signing. So, very happy, thanks.
Absolutely. The Reading FC Twitter, thank you very much for lining up with the podcast recording, because we have had it a few times where we're kind of on the wrong side of the announcement. But Josh Lawrence, 25-year-old midfielder, I think, kind of described like Andy Winamatta, but we'll get onto that in a bit later. And also joining us this week is Adam Jones, Tilehurst writer. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. A season of stability, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into that story of the season review then. Before we do that, a quick thank you, as always, to our sponsors, ZCZ Films, and obviously to our Patreon campaigners as well, who continue in these difficult times to put their hand in their pocket and reward us with a few pennies in the tip jar. Right then, story of the season. It's the 2019-20 Reading FC season review coming up next.
Be loud and be proud and back the boys and make some noise. Come on, you Rs!
Shout out to this week's podcast sponsor, ZCZ Films, showing that age is no barrier to being a hula hoop.
Where do we begin? A long time ago, basically. It was summer. It was a stop-start summer last year, as well as we sit here in summer now. Guys, it was a really interesting summer that we were kind of, it was like a washing machine, basically, as I reckon we call it. It felt like we were thrown around from saying, yes, this is going to be a summer of doing very little business with academy kids and loan players, and a lot of, if anything, we're gonna be pinching the pennies. Michael Morrison, Charlie Adam arrived on frees. Brought in a few loan players, Yao Virginia, the goalkeeper, Lucas Boye, Ovia Jaria came back, Pele as well. And we're sort of thinking, okay, that's going to be how it is. Matt Miazga came in on loan as well. Then out of nowhere, right towards the end of the window, Lucas Shaw, £5 million, George Busquets, £8 million, Raphael, new goalkeeper, brought in. And Olly, we didn't know what to think. I certainly didn't know what to think. This summer business, looking back on it now, it seemed to be a bit of a mad one.
Yeah, I was about to use that exact word. It was a mad couple of days, really. Obviously we had the soft embargo earlier on in the summer, as you mentioned, bringing in sort of free signings of Michael Morrison and Charlie Adam, who we didn't expect to do much. And obviously Adam's not done too much, but Michael Morrison's been fantastic this season and probably been, out of all the signings, out of all the ones we paid money for later on in the window, Michael Morrison on a free transfer early in the window probably proved to be one of the best bits of business, along with Raphael on free. Obviously, I think Raphael's probably my player of the season, which shows you how well he's done, sort of adapting to life in a new country, learning a new language. It makes me, shudder really thinking about what would have happened if we hadn't have signed him and had that. Obviously, João Virginia had his 2 games at the start of the season and in the League Cup against Wolves, and didn't really do much to impress in either of them. So, it was a strange couple of days. I think probably our expectations shot up after that sort of end to the window. I think we'd lost the first 2 games against Sheffield Wednesday and against Hull. But those new signings then combined with the win over Cardiff 3-0 at home, I think probably got everyone thinking that, hang on a minute, we might be able to push for promotion here. Which it did for that week, of course, when I think we drew with West Brom and then beat Huddersfield. But then for Gomez, at least, it was downhill from there.
It was a weird first couple of weeks of the season, as you say. We actually had 10 friendlies going into the season, which I just found a bit weird, to be honest. the outgoings we had Liam Kelly, John Daly Bovarson, and Ridge Novakovic and Mark McNulty, the sort of main players who left. Generally speaking, though, in the cold light of day, I'd say that summer business it set us up relatively well. There's not many massive errors. We'd have to say, the Lucas João, George Puskas thing. João hasn't lived up to his billings. He's been injured a lot of time. Puskas, we can probably do a whole podcast on Puskas. He's love-hate relationship with him almost. But generally speaking, it set us up okay. Would you say that there were any kind of massive errors that were made in the summer business?
I think the biggest thing for me is George Puskas signing for £8 million after our soft transfer embargo at the start of the summer. So that was slightly confusing. Obviously, the deal has been well constructed. But I think that's probably the most questionable business. I mean, he's done all right, actually, considering that. He's scored about 13 or 14 goals this season. So that's not too bad. But overall, it's been very good. I think it sums it up all really when the Michael Morrison signing was announced. We were expecting Mailbag to be announced, and then Morrison was announced, and the fan base were like, oh God, isn't Mailbag? But he's proved to be one of the best signings of the season, if not the best, because it's a no-frill signing really. It's been very good, and I thought Charlie Adam, just for his experience in the dressing room, has been very good, and that's not even mentioning Raphael, who's, I think we would have been doomed without him, because Paul João Virginia, he just didn't settle in very well. But we've brought Raphael in for free, and he's probably one of the best goalkeepers in the league, if not the best.
Yeah, Raphael, I think as a piece of business, Reading Football Club, João Virginia aside, as you say, have signed really good goalkeepers over the last few years, and many people say that it's a sign of a not very good club, or not very good team, should we say, when your goalkeeper year on year keeps winning Player of the Season, and the club's official Player of the Season has been a goalkeeper. I think Federici's won it. Al-Habsi won it a couple times. Raphael won it. Emi Martinez could have probably won it last year. So yeah, he's been there's no doubt he's been a good signing. We got into the season then. Jose Gomez obviously still the manager at this point. After those first two defeats, there was that mad week, as you mentioned, Ollie. Beat Cardiff in fantastic style. Drew probably should have beat a West Brom team that in the end got promoted. Beat Huddersfield away very convincingly, and we thought we might be decent. But from that Huddersfield win, Jose Gomez didn't win another game. 5 defeats in 6, and he was Reading were 22nd when he left. Ollie, do you have any regrets over him leaving? Because I find it very interesting that certainly on like social media and everything, they see all the people with the Portuguese flags and the usernames and everything. It felt like he was destined to enter Reading folklore, and it just feels to me that he didn't actually grasp that sort of opportunity that the fans were there to love him forever. He just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this at a time when he was sacked, that you can't go against what Gomez did off the pitch for the club. I think we spoke about it, that the club was in such a dire state when he came in, and Paul Clement had been in charge, and the fan base was really at an all-time low in terms of mood. I personally was incredibly apathetic towards the football club. And you can't underestimate what Gomez did off the pitch to solve that, really. He was charismatic. He came across very well in his interviews. He seemed to genuinely, love and care for the club and for the town. And obviously the wins in the second half of last season did help towards that, but he did seem a genuinely nice guy. And it's just, I suppose, unfortunate the results on the pitch didn't match up to that. And ultimately, that's probably why you can't really argue with the sacking, and why ultimately I don't have that many regrets, because I think he left the club with the second worst win percentage in modern era, only slightly ahead of Paul Clement. And as you say, with the club in the relegation zone, then obviously look at what Mark Bowen has done. Obviously, he's not worked miracles, and we're not in the playoffs, but he got us out of trouble, fairly quickly. And we finished the season 14th. So look, I'll always like Jose Gomez, the man. I thought he was a lovely, lovely guy. Came across very well. But as a football manager, and as football is a results business, ultimately he didn't get those results, and we have got results since he left. So no regrets from my end, I don't think.
No, and I was lucky enough to have met him twice, one-on-one, and have a chat with him. Obviously, the interview went up on the Tilehurst podcast, and I can vouch for him just being a nice guy. And that I've always thought, as you say, the off the pitch, there is nothing he could have done more, really. Which he certainly deserved a lot of the adulation, the Portugal Day thing as well. He deserved that sort of adulation. I do personally find it a bit odd how it did fizzle out. I suppose maybe that's because of maybe there was that undue hype from that week of good results and how it did sort of fizzle out from that on the pitch. Adam, from a tactical point of view, why didn't Jose Gomez get it right? What was the sort of analytical side of him falling or him losing his job effectively on the pitch?
I mean, it's just I think it's some of it is down to recruitment as well, because we said that we did some very good business in the summer, but did every single player suit his style? Because we're not sure. Obviously, in the previous January, he brought some players in that I thought fitted his style. I think Emi Martinez definitely did with his passing. Ajaria definitely did. And but you look at the stats as well from his last season. Obviously, he helped to raise the mood and that sort of thing. But he had 23 games in the season that he did well. 6 wins, 10 draws, 7 losses, 28 points out of possible 69. So maybe it was to be expected. Maybe it was just because of the feel-good factor from last season, from the previous season, that we were so surprised by it. And even going into the next season, 11 games, 2 wins, 2 draws, 7 losses and 8 points out of a possible 33. And if you combine that, that's just not good enough. Even though we're not expecting to go for a promotion, it's just not good enough for me.
I suppose, as you say there, with the recruitment players like Michael Morrison as well, just they're not passing it around the back sort of players. And when you had we in this second half of the season, we're in a privileged position compared to the last few years, because we've not really conceded goals from just knocking it round at the back and giving the ball up. We seem to gift half of the goals we conceded, and that is basically one of the things that Marc Bowen came in. Obviously, there was we forget about it now, but the famous idea that he hired himself because he was, I think, his director of football just before he got the job. And you think about the other men that were being touted around. I mean, we're never going to get Chris Hughton, and otherwise than that, there wasn't really anyone that's obviously going to be, the obvious candidate for the job. So Marc Bowen came in, steadied the ship. 3 wins out of 4. That still only had a 17th after that little spurt. So really, the playoff dream was pretty much dead and buried even by that point of the season. But we still, Olly pulled out a real decent purple patch over Christmas, 4 victories in a row. Just before that, we had 4 clean sheets in a row, or sort of in amongst that. Wins at Preston and Fulham. Playoffs they were still a bit far off, but there was just actually coming into the new year, there was just genuine optimism for the first time in a little while.
Yeah, just on that Bowen appointment quickly, I think it's very easy to forget quite how unpopular it actually was. I think it was, for me, surely the worst reaction I've ever seen to a managerial appointment in the time that I've been following Reading. The pure discontent for Marc Bowen, and almost hatred really for Marc Bowen, that he'd supposedly appointed himself, that he sacked Gomez and appointed himself. It was vitriolic really that time. But fair play to me, he turned it around, and obviously getting a 98th minute winner in your first game obviously helps matters considerably. That run over Christmas was probably our best run of winning games for, I think, since Jaap Stam's first season in charge. So I think it wasn't just the wins, it was the clean sheets as well. I think we got clean sheets against Derby, QPR and Preston, having got a clean sheet against Stoke beforehand. So that's 4 clean sheets in a row. And especially those 2 away games over the New Year's period, going to Preston and to Fulham, 2 sides who I think were chasing the playoffs at that point, or might even have been in the top 6. And those were massive results. And the goal he was scoring, Tyler Blackett was having a whale of a time down the left-hand side, putting crosses into the box and pulling the ball back into the box. Even Charlie Adams scores against Fulham. And there was a real good feeling on the place. at that time, and you can credit it to a new manager bounce, whatever. But that was still 2 months into Marc Bowen's tenure, and he seemed to get the team playing really, really well. Whether there was a genuine chance of playoffs, I think probably it was more sort of that hype drove the fan base to think that there might be a chance, and realistically that sort of 4 wins in a row form wasn't sustainable over the course of the whole season. But it brought the feel-good mood back to it after, obviously, the way that Gomez's tenure had ended. I'm just looking at the results of Marc Bowen's first games now. He only lost 3 games between the 19th of October when he took charge and the 18th of January. So that's 3 defeats in 3 months is not bad going at all to start your tenure. The playoff dream was probably a bit unfounded, but you can't really ask for a much better start than that from Marc Bowen, I think.
Yeah, but I remember we had I think it's the Blackburn game right towards the end of the season, and there was with the madness of that, some people have said, "Oh, that kind of summed up the season." But to me, the game that summed up the season was the Stoke away game that we drew 0-0 and didn't have a shot on target, because we have drawn. I think Gomez did draw away at Stoke, and maybe this kind of was my point. But I don't think we've had a manager for years. Maybe might have to go back to someone like Brian McDermott, who is capable of having this outlook as a manager. Yaps down to an extent did, but to go to an away game and just say, yeah, okay, we're going to have a scrappy game, we're going to pick up a point, and it's going to be a clean sheet, and we're going to move on, and that'll be fine, and won't apologise for it, and won't be, we're not playing perfect football and everything. Because, yeah, it does suck if you're a Reading fan and you go to Stoke and we don't have a shot on target. But at the same point, it's a point in the bag, and it then followed by 4 straight wins. And I think that having almost the balls as a manager to do that, and if we lose that game, obviously it doesn't work. But the fact that we did get a clean sheet, get the point, move on, we basically done the same performance at Barnsley in the midweek beforehand. I think that's a lot of credit to Marc Bowen, because it did build the foundations for a good period of form. And Adam, when it came into the games after that, the season did start to drift. And why do you think that was? Was it we had a hell of a lot of games, busy cup run, January investment, there wasn't really anything to freshen up the team. There was some sloppy home displays against Bristol City, Hull and Wigan. Why do you think the season sort of started to drift at that point?
It's interesting, really, and it's really surprising considering we started that 1 win in 10 run against Nottingham Forest at home, and that was the game where I think we conceded to Ben Watson in 90 plus 6th minute or something like that, and then we went straight down the other end and scored. So maybe that drained us mentally a little bit, especially with all the games as well that we'd had over the festive period. For sure, I think it was probably the mixture of those things as well, and also there was probably quite a bit of expectation after the Fulham game. I think I saw a video of a chant of us saying we're going up, or the Royals are going up. So maybe it was a bit of that pressure as well. We were never expecting to go up, but when we were on that run, we thought, well, why stop now? And I think it definitely was. I think it was more of a mental thing as opposed to a physical thing. I think a lot of people as well forget the fact that football is just as much of a mental game as it is physical, and I think the mental side of it, understandably, let us down in that run.
Yeah, I think that's a good point when it comes to having to pick yourself up every it was every 3 days basically. In that cup run, we had a hell of a lot of chopping and changing in the team as well. Ollie, why do you think that the season did start to drift? Was it perhaps that the playoffs were just too out of reach, and that therefore, as soon as we basically knew that we were going to be a bit of a cup run team maybe for this season, like January, sort of early February time, that the players maybe their minds do kind of slowly drift a bit?
I mean, the elephant in the room is obviously Marc Bowen's new contract in mid-January, and whether you want to take from that, obviously similar things happened with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at United last season, where when he was given the job on a permanent basis, they slumped dramatically. I'm not sure whether I believe there's anything quite in that. I think whether Marc Bowen took his foot off the gas now that he'd been guaranteed his future beyond the end of this season, there's potentially something in that. But it's so many games in such a short space of time. Whether the sort of the new manager bounce wore off a little bit. I don't know. I think ultimately we almost sort of plateaued in that period. I think as I said, that run over Christmas was almost unsustainable, and is unsustainable for any team really, unless you're sort of going to go and smash the league, which with the squad we have, we obviously weren't going to. So 4 wins in a row was nice, but the run that followed, it was certainly frustrating. I mean, from my point of view, I think one of my favourite games of the season came in that period, and that was the cup game away to Cardiff, when we went through on penalties, 2-0 down in normal time, got it back to 2-2, went 3-2 down in extra time, got it back to 3-3, and then won on penalties with Shani Aluko scoring the winning penalty, which I never thought I would hear myself say. But I think ultimately the season just sort of plateaued out, and I think to be honest, I think I was guilty of it myself, sort of having expectations of getting into the top 6 after that run at Christmas, and ultimately, it's sort of the hope that kills you, I suppose, that maybe they were a little bit optimistic, those hopes, and we were never sort of really destined to be more than a mid-table team.
Well, after that run of 1 win in 10 in the Championship, Reading did win 2 games against Barnsley and Birmingham, and then football, as we all know, ended temporarily. And this is the difficult thing when you come to reviewing seasons, because I look at, I don't bother. I'm not going to say where Reading were home versus away in terms of the table this season. We know where they were at the end of the original part of the season, but after the second half, there were no fans in the stadium. So I don't think those things are relevant anymore, because it was such a unique final stint, and you can see Reading's drop off very comfortably if you compare the two things. After Mark Bowen came in charge, up until the lockdown, or the shutdown rather, Reading were 5th in the league for the form in that period from like mid-October to mid-March. After the restart, Reading were 19th. I'll ask you guys why you think that is, why we did struggle in that environment, but I can tell you that 4 of the bottom 6 in the post-restart mini-league were all in the same boat as us. QPR, Sheffield Wednesday, I think Birmingham as well, just all in the same boat, the season being over, the relegation not really being a thing, playoffs not really being a thing. And the seasons, it was really hard. Adam, why do you think that? Why was it so hard for Reading to regather momentum in that final few weeks?
I think you've got to think about the loan players as well, because a lot of them might not have been. Well, I think a lot of them are not going to be coming back next season. So maybe that was the thing. Maybe their mind was on something else. I think you have to consider the lack of crowd, but every team was in the same boat. And I think the Luton and the Charlton game, the wins there, probably masked over how people felt after the Brentford game. And I think people had enough, not necessarily of Mark Bowen, but just of how the team's been performing over the past couple of years. But I couldn't put it down to one single thing that caused this. Maybe it is a mentality issue, and maybe this is a thing that we need to sort out. But we've got to realise as well that Andy Yeardom and Michael Morrison have been captains at other teams in the past. Liam Moore's obviously the current captain. So there shouldn't be that issue. There should be that leadership. So that's the reason why I'm so confused that our form differed so badly. Maybe Ollie will have something.
Yeah, Ollie, do you feel that would you feel that the lack of fans hindered Reading in a weird way, because our home form was pretty rubbish beforehand anyway?
I mean, I think Adam makes a good point that every team played without any fans, so it's not as if Reading were at any disadvantage in that aspect. It's a strange one. I think that the point you make, Mark, is really, really important. That that if you look at that table since the restart, and the teams that are also sort of similarly struggled, like Reading, likes of Bristol City, likes of Sheffield Wednesday, QPR, all finished mid-table, and it probably is that fact that there was nothing really to play for. And this Reading team doesn't really strike me as a side that can get up for a nothing game. I think probably injuries a little bit played a part. Obviously, Lucas Shaw got injured in that first game against Stoke. We didn't have Andy Yeardom at all for any of the restart games. Ovie Ejaria got injured towards the end of it, so that probably played a part. But I think it's just the fact that Reading ultimately had nothing to play for, and that can still be disappointing because you still want to see the team winning games, and the fact that we only won 2 games out of 9 since the restart is very, very disappointing, has to be said. Especially when you look at where Reading were going into the restart. We all had these massive expectations. I think some people, I think I said 6 out of 10 for the playoffs, which obviously seems to be very, very optimistic. But you look at the teams that were around Reading at that point. Cardiff, Swansea, were only maybe 3-4 points ahead of Reading, which I suppose in the grand scheme of things is quite a lot. But obviously they've ended up going on great runs and sort of making the playoffs. So it was there for the taking for Reading, and they certainly could and perhaps should have finished a lot higher up than they did based on the fixtures post-lockdown. But I think, as I say, Adam makes a good point about the loan players not being here next season, our contract players not being here next season, and players perhaps not really care. That's probably a bit harsh to say they didn't care, but not having as much interest, fighting right until the very last minute to get a result.
And I think the thing that we've not really mentioned so far is just the outright quality of those players. And you can look at the Championship, and certainly with teams like Cardiff who are in the playoffs, and I think Brentford, Fulham and Swansea probably do have better players than us. With Andre Ayew, for example, plays for Swansea. We don't have a player that good. But Cardiff, Preston, Bristol City, just quickly look at the Championship table, Millwall, Nottingham Forest, Blackburn, they're not got better teams than us, but we were coming from further back. And I think the reason that we are where we are is effectively, I think a large percentage of that is just down to the quality of the players that we have, and the balance of the squad and the tactics, everything feeds off of that. Because if you do have, you look at West Brom, for example, the depth that they have, of the talent that they have, and even they only squeaked into the automatic promotion zone. We just didn't have that. So I think that plays a large part in it. And with that in mind, guys, we'll talk in a minute about, I want to get our idea on the standout performance of the season individually and the game of the season. But 15th/14th, depending on what happens with Wigan. 8 points clear of the drop zone, 14 points off the playoffs in the end. Would you say that is ultimately fair in terms of overachieving, underachieving for this team, or do you think that we've either punched above our weight or below our weight? Adam, what do you think on that?
It's okay. I think that's the 3 words I would use. It is okay. Obviously, I don't feel like Bowen is the man to take us forward. I want him to be here long term, but obviously as a director of football. It's okay. I don't think we should go into this summer, though, signing players with the intent of getting promotion. I think we do need a director of football after the summer, and I think this summer should be a 2-man team of Bowen and Howe. But going back to the season overall, I think there's not that much you can say about it. I think it's been a season of reasonable stability, and it's definitely a relief as well after finishing, I think it's 20th or something for the past 2 seasons. And it felt good, even though towards the end of the season we felt that we might get dragged into the relegation battle. There was never any real genuine fear that we would go down. Maybe some people felt that when Marc Bowen was appointed. But you get to the mid-season and we'd been doing well. And that hasn't been the case over the past couple of seasons. So obviously it's okay, but I'm definitely grateful for the job that Marc Bowen has done so far, because now we can push on and rebuild the squad without the fact that we finished just outside the relegation zone, which would have been not ideal going into a squad rebuild.
Olly, when you think back to those expectations you might have had at the start of the season, and how everything has played out in front of us, 14th/15th, fair result?
Well, I was looking back at my pre-season predictions actually a couple of days ago, and I had Reading to finish 16th. So I'll take a 14th/15th place finish. It probably does sum up the last 12 months. It has been such a long season, really. I think Reading have had their moments for sure. We'll talk about the best games in a minute, but we saw glimpses, for sure. That 3-0 win against Cardiff in August, where George Puskas announced himself to the league, was a really, really good game. That the win over Fulham on New Year's Day that we've talked about, the 5-0 win over Luton post restart, showed how good this side could be. But ultimately, they were sort of only glimpses, I suppose. And all too often, Reading couldn't sort of get that momentum. Obviously, we had the run over Christmas, but other than that, couldn't really sort of string 3-4 wins together regularly enough to sort of push up the table. And we saw the worst of the team really in that 3-0 defeat at Wigan. At home to Wigan in February, which for my money was, the worst Reading performance I've seen, in a good 2-3 years really. And that's from someone who sat through Paul Clement. So we've seen the good and the bad of Reading, and I think ultimately, that means that we are, going to end up, slap bang mid-table, which we have. So it's progress for sure. As Adam says, 2 20th consecutive place finishes is certainly, now an improvement to finish 14th/15th. But yeah, as I say, I think with the hope we had going into sort of the restart, it would have been nice to finish perhaps a little bit higher.
Yeah, absolutely. I think let's move on quickly, sort of quick-fire questions then on the standout performance individually and the game of the season. Standout performance, I mean, there's only really 2 players that I could think of for this. Meite scoring 4 versus Luton, George Puskas scoring a hat-trick against Wigan in like 8 minutes, I think it was as well. That's my pick because I've not seen a Reading player do that, anything close to that before. Interestingly enough, with Meite, only one man, that's Jan Kermigan in 16-17, has scored more in a season than Meite has in the 8 previous seasons. So Meite got 17 this season, 19 for Jan Kermigan in that playoff season. So Meite with a fantastic scoring run. Adam, your standout performance and my game of the season before we go on is the 2-2 draw at QPR, which is a really weird one, but purely because it was the Bowen who came in. It was an away game I kind of attended on my own because it's not too far away from where I'd recently moved to, and was a fantastic championship night of thrills and spills and controversy and goals. So I just really enjoyed that one from a personal point of view. So Adam, what are your standout performance in your game of the season?
As you said, it's a tough pick between George Puskas against Wigan and Yaku Meite against Luton. But I think I'm going to go with Yaku Meite against Luton, just for the fact that he scored 4 goals. And it was such a surprise as well that he stepped up to the plate, particularly this week when we didn't have that much to play for. But just to score 4 goals, I don't think I could give it to anyone else but him, to be honest, except from Puskas. In terms of the game of the season, I think I'm going to go with our 2-1 away win at Fulham, just because of the fact that we weren't expecting it at all. I guess both my choices is because they're such a surprise. Because we went to Scott Parker's Fulham and we thought we wouldn't get that much out of it, even though we did well against Preston North End. We didn't expect to take all 3 points, but we managed to in the end, and it was an expert performance. And Charlie Adams scored, so I can't say any more than that.
Well, yeah, one of the most famous images of the season certainly was Charlie Adams celebrating that, quite harshly, I must say, for the poor bloke. But yeah, Ollie, what are you saying for standout and game of the season?
Yeah, I can't look any further than Yaku Meite against Luton. Apologies to everyone who thought I should have given him a 10 in the player ratings. But yeah, first Reading player to score 4 goals in the game since 1982. So that's one hell of an achievement for him. Game of the season, I mentioned it earlier, but probably that Cardiff Cup game, partly for similar reasons for you. It was an away game that I attended because I go to uni in Cardiff, so it's nice and local. Second time we played Cardiff away in the space of 4 days, and we played them on the Friday night and then the Tuesday night, which is quite rare. But in terms of the game of football that sort of gave me the most joy in the whole season, has to be that one. That game summed up to me exactly why we love football. The highs and the lows, the hope, the despair, cup football, cup magic, and to end it on a penalty shootout win in which sort of really all the scorers in that shootout had a narrative. Jordan Abita scoring a penalty, having missed at Wembley a couple of years before, obviously not quite comparable, but still getting redemption to an extent. Gareth McClear, I think, scored in the shootout. Great to see Gabe Osho score a penalty, and then Sonny Luco popping up, as I say, to score the winner, which was completely unexpected. So in terms of the game that sort of gave me the most joy throughout the season, it had to be that one.
Yeah, absolutely. There was certainly with the away games, there is that joy of just the pure encompassing football game. You can take away any whether it's a league, cup game, whatever, in the wider narrative of the season. But just to enjoy a game of football, 90 minutes, obviously that was 120 minutes plus. But yeah, there is nothing quite like it. It's certainly why we turn up every week. Let's finish on the prediction league in terms of the review of the season. It was a 7th place finish for Handbags. He basically went 3-1 Reading win for all the games this season. So Handbags 7th place, 16 points. Westy, I think he won it last year, 6th this year, 20 points. Olly, you were 5th with 22, just behind William and Johnny, who were 3rd on 23. Sim, quite comfortable.
I won it last year, I think.
Oh, sorry, Westy won it the year before, then you won it, last year. So that, I guess that shows exactly how nonsense this thing is that you're now 5th and 6th together. Sim was 2nd on 29. Then I was miles ahead all season. Weirdly, just started quite well. 36 points for myself. So I'll give my nice pat on the back for myself. Actually, my trophy is that I allowed myself to post the scoreboard on Twitter. So if anyone wants to go and see the ultimate 46-game 7-man breakdown of predictions of the Tilehurst League, they're on our Twitter page. And with that, we'll move on to the final mailbag of the season.
You're listening to the Tilehurst End podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Right, so for the last mailbag of the season, Laura Will begins us with the question of, if the 2019-20 season was a 3-course meal, what would it be and what drink would you have with it? Right, okay. I'm gonna start with my drink. I think that a pint of Brains Bitter, Welsh, not for everyone's taste, but gets the job done, is my pint for Marc Bowen. In terms of a starter, I'd probably go with a pretty thin, yet attractive soup, I would say. Is a probably best way of saying what Jose Gomez gave us. A nice looking, but not too much substance. And then a main course of a healthy portion of fish and chips, because something that, again, does the job, is actually quite tasty. May not look brilliant, but actually, is a favourite. And then the dessert, I would say an apple crumble that is slightly too hot, because it's something that you can enjoy, but it's obviously been left in the oven too long and it's come out too late, and it's just a little bit burnt on top, just a little bit too hot. And you just think, maybe this isn't the best thing I could have ordered. But there we go. I'm stuck with it. And go on then, Olly. You want to throw in your 3-course meal?
On down similar lines. I thought maybe some sort of Portuguese appetizer at the start of the meal, maybe some sort of tart or a sausage or something like that, to sort of whet the appetite. Main course I've gone with, also with the Welsh theme, Welsh rarebit, to signify bone, and something doesn't perhaps look particularly pretty, but can be quite satisfying. Something quite warm over Christmas. Obviously, we did very well over Christmas. And then dessert, I've gone for a chocolate brownie, just because it sort of signifies our sort of lockdown form. You can get quite excited about it. It seems like it's going to be quite exciting, but often, it's perhaps a bit disappointing, and you wish you almost hadn't gone for it. Much like the restart. And then just for my drink, I would go for anything incredibly alcoholic, because I would quite simply not want to sit through that season anymore. The longest of all seasons, and I think we were probably all quite thankful when it came to an end last week. So anything, very, very alcoholic, just to see me through that horrific season again.
Yeah, I'm detecting a sort of theme here. Okay, so Matt Williams, the next question then. What standard / leagues do you think the released players, McCleary, Gunter, Obita and Charlie Adam in particular, will be playing next season? Any surprises? Adam sadly had to drop out for a little bit due to technical problems. So Olly, you have free reign to discuss whether the released players are going to come back to haunt us.
I think probably the most likely to be playing Championship football next season will be Chris Gunter. Already linked with potentially a move to Neil Warnock's Middlesbrough, maybe to Birmingham, maybe back to Cardiff. But he's probably the one out of that lot, I'd say, is most likely to be playing Championship football. Jordan Obita as well, potentially. Obviously coming back from quite 2 years out injured, and didn't quite hit the heights of pre-injury since he came back. But certainly on his day, and he's still only 25, so I'm sure Jordan Obita will be, if not next season, then certainly I'd expect in the next couple of years to be back in the Championship. Charlie Adam might move to Scotland, I suppose. There's been talk about that, or potentially move back to Blackpool. But I'd expect his days in the Championship are probably done. Probably the same with Gareth McCleary as well. I think I can see him maybe going to Oxford. I know there was talk of that potentially happening.
Nice homecoming for him, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think he played for Oxford City, so I don't know whether there's any rivalry between those two teams. But and that was rumoured last summer. I can see that happening this summer, but I can't. He barely started for Reading in the Championship this season, so I can't really see. I think he's 33 now as well, so I can't really see another Championship side picking up on him. But as I say, maybe League One for him.
Yeah, I think really I cannot imagine Chris Gunter not going to a Championship team. It would just be weird if he ends up having to drop down to League One or maybe go abroad or something to a lower level. And otherwise Jordan Obita, I really don't know with Jordan Obita. It is sad, like genuinely really sad to see him leave the club. He was a longest serving player. You have to wonder what sort of player and career he would have had it not been for his massive knee injury. You cannot legislate for that sort of thing in a career, and you cannot underestimate the impact it might have had on him mentally as well as physically. And where he goes from here, it's difficult for what was effectively a one-club man. He's very versatile. I personally kept him, but from what it sounds like, Reading just offered him a contract that he didn't feel obliged to accept. So he's moved on, and I don't think that any of those players are necessarily going to come back to haunt us, but Jordan Obita is one that I think it's going to be really interesting to see where he'll go, because it is very unpredictable in this climate. Jack Killick saying, even though it's painful now, do you think this forced reset caused by the financial fair play restrictions will be beneficial in the long term? I must say, Olly, I don't think we're going to have a forced reset this summer. I don't think financial fair play is really going to have that much of an impact. And therefore, I don't think, if the rumours are true that we're not selling John Swift because we've decided we want a bigger fee for him than what Sheffield United in the Premier League are prepared to pay, I think it might actually be, in terms of the big money makers leaving the club, I'm not sure we'll see very much.
No, perhaps not. I think John Swift probably will leave at some point in the summer. Hopefully not for $3.5 million, but I can't see him not leaving, to be honest with you. But I mean, even if he does stay, we've already had with the out of contract players and the loanees leaving as well. We've already had 9-10 players who were here last season. Won't be here next year, so we are going to have to replace those to an extent. We certainly can't. We certainly can't be spending the money we did last summer. We definitely have to cut back on the spending. I think that's been obvious for some time now. We simply cannot afford to spend as much as we did. Otherwise, we all whether the relaxations are put in place now or whenever, we can't keep on spending beyond our means. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, we won't have a club to support. So I expect, obviously, we've seen Josh Laurent come in on a free transfer. I expect sort of deals, along those lines, either from lower leagues or not very much money being spent. But I think it has to benefit us because, as I say, the club is spending well beyond its means at the moment.
Yeah, and also it's just not worked for us. Whenever we go out and spend loads of money, Sonny Aluko, George Busquets, you could even say, Immerse Faye going back all those days, Thiago Ilori didn't really work, he was a record signing. It doesn't suit us for whatever reason. Reading Football Club, I think it partly must be due to the nature of the fans as well. We do give players who are on a free and everything. I guess a lot of clubs do this, but we don't really, as fans, get on with massive money signings unless they're brilliant, and they don't tend to be brilliant. So maybe it's partly down to us and who we sort of back, and the academy players coming through will back as well. But yeah, it doesn't worry me if we do have a forced reset. I'm not. Who knows what sort of climate we're walking into right now. Michael Hunter saying, how many games do you think Bowen will get to prove himself? Fenner's also saying, who do we want as our new manager? I really don't want to have to sack a manager this season. whether you like Mark Bowen or not, I think he'll get a reasonable chance to prove himself. Again, depending on how the summer goes and the finances, but I just really do not want to be getting into a situation yet again in October where we're thinking, oh, we've lost 3 games in a row, we're 15th, it's time to sack it. I just don't want it. I just have no time. I just have no time for even considering it, to be honest, Ollie. Just how much money we've spent as a club sacking managers and how much time we thought, oh, well, this season's dead, let's go to the next one. I don't want it. Mark Burns, I just want Mark Burns to be the manager for a whole season next season. Whether you like him or not, that's just what I want.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm tired of sacking managers, if I'm totally honest. We were once a club that was almost the epitome of stability, with Steve Coppell being here for 6, 7 years or so. Brian McDermott was here for a long time, and in the last 8 years, it's been pretty much every season. I think Jaap Stam's the only manager we've had in the last 6, 7 years that have lasted a whole season. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Mark Bowen has only got until next summer on his contract. So it's difficult because obviously if we are, bottom of the league come November, then obviously I wouldn't be against the change. And I'm not advocating keeping Mark Bowen at all costs, simply for stability. But as you say, if we are, mid-table come October, November, there's no point making that decision then, because I feel confident in Mark Bowen that he's not going to take us down. Whether he is going to take us up is an entirely different matter, and the answer to that is probably not, based on what we've seen so far. But I do believe that he's the right man. Certainly, this is going to be a very, very difficult summer, I think, for Reading in terms of finances, in terms of keeping the squad together. And I think someone who knows the club, someone who knows the environment, who's worked not only as manager but behind the scenes as well, is the best person to certainly take the club, to Christmas and probably beyond. Because, as I say, ultimately, if the season doesn't go, completely to plan, then we make a change next summer. But I'm in complete agreement with you that I am tired of season after season sacking managers, and that's not the club that I fell in love with, I suppose.
No, and the thing with Mark Bowen as well is that, is he good enough to have us in and around the conversation for the playoffs by March, April, whatever? Yes, I think he is. So if that's what he delivers, then I would say it's actually, if we are within 5 points of the playoffs with 6 games to go next season, I think almost no matter what happens between now and then, that's a good season. Famous last words to say this when we're actually top after Christmas and then go and fluff a 20-point lead. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, can he do that? Yes. So I think that's enough for what we need at the moment. Jacob McGeehan said, should we cash in on Liam Moore to help relieve FFP a little? If so, what then? If someone offers £5 million, they can have him, as far as I'm concerned. We've been perfectly fine without him this season. And centre-back, we're not going to keep Matt Miazga. Let's just face it, that's not going to happen. Michael Morrison with Tom McIntyre and Tom Holmes, the other centre-back from the academy that Mark Bowen has talked up a bit. If Gabriel Osho stays as well, he can play there. And signing another who is on less money than Liam Moore, I think is a really reasonable situation to be in next season. What do I think is going to happen? I don't know, Ollie. Once again, I just can't see someone coming in and giving us millions of pounds for Liam Moore.
Yeah, I think it's his wages as well. He was given a bumper contract, and by all accounts is one of the best paid players in the squad when he was given that new deal 2 years ago. So it's a case of A club to pay Reading that money, and then B to pay more, those wages, or at least very similar. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him go this summer, if I'm totally honest. I think he's been disappointing for the last couple of years, a bit underwhelming, and as we discussed it on this podcast itself, that some of Reading's best performances, albeit perhaps against weaker sides, have come without Liam Moore in the back four. If we did sell him, then we would need to bring someone else in, but I'm sure there are plenty of cheaper options out there. One that I saw early this week was Tom Lockyer, who's got a relegation clause in his Charlton contract that means he can leave for free should they go down, which they have. And I've always been very impressed whenever I've seen him play for Charlton or for Wales. So there's definitely cheaper options out there, as I say.
Yeah, you've got to think, we took Josh Laurent off of Shrewsbury for free because his contract was up. But think of how many League One clubs are going to be, A, really struggling for money, pick up players on the cheap there. Not a very nice thought, I know, for those clubs. But those clubs are going to have a hell of a lot of free agents floating around, such as Jordan Abiti, Gaffer Cleary, etc. The footballing economy might slightly work in our favour in those respects to pick up good League One players, and I'm not against that being our attitude this summer. Tip Top Reading saying, what is a reasonable expectation for next season, and what style of football will Bowen be trying to instill? I think a reasonable expectation is to be the same again at the worst. You always have to be looking forwards. If we're 13th next season, that's the minimum requirement for me. I think to be honest, in terms of style of football, I think this debate, Ollie, it's a brilliant debate to have when you're winning. We did have this debate when we were winning under Yapstam. We then didn't. We haven't had it since because we've not been winning, so it's not mad. And if we are winning, I think the style of football he will be trying to instill is one of being hard to beat. And I'm okay with that if it works. And if we are hard to beat, if we're rubbish and we're playing badly, then yeah, it's not going to work. But reasonable expectation for you, would you say we have to be in and around the playoff picture?
I'd probably say top 10. I think I would like to finish next season, which would be good progress from next season. It's going to be, I think, quite a strong championship next year. Bournemouth and Watford coming down are two very good teams, even though they will probably have very big squad transformations. It's going to be a difficult season. Norwich coming down, yes, they've bombed in the Premier League, but they've got a very good squad that's capable and ready for the championship. Some of the playoff teams, Brentford might still be in the league next season. There's a number of other teams that I'm sure will strengthen. So I think the playoffs might be too much to ask, especially based off what our transfer activity is going to be like this summer. I think we need to probably lower our expectations slightly. But as you say, I think you have to be looking for progress from the previous season. So I would probably take top 10. But as on the playing style briefly, I think if we're winning games, then no one's really going to care how we're playing. It's a results business, as I say. So if we're winning games, then great. If we're losing games, then it obviously becomes a bit more of a problem. But yeah, I would hope for progress, I think.
Yeah, I see a lot on Twitter in particular, people saying about identity in the club, not having an identity of playing style and stuff like that under Marc Mayo, which I find to be a bit odd. We don't play passing football, but it almost seems to me like it is something that fans do look for. And I must say, it's not something that I do. It's not something I think we're going to get under Bowen, so it's not something I'm massively looking for myself as a box that I need ticking. As it were. Josh Buck asking, do you think that those at the top of the club deserve to let us fans know what is going on? It all seems very quiet up there. At least Norwich have a sporting director that is quite open, and I feel like we need that. Well, it reminds me actually on the Tilehurst End website, we had the Dolan View, or the not from the Dolan View, as it were, saying Directions of Funny Things by Ben from B13, which was really good sort of a overview of the direction the club are heading in now. So I urge you to go and read that for more sort of in-depth on this topic. But personally, transparency is always a wonderful thing. There is no accountability at a football club. I think that's probably the way I would describe it. You don't get to dislodge the chairman if you don't like him, unless you've got 2 billion quid in your bank account. So I would always like more from the club. When the club have put out stuff in the past, such as statements, such as Nigel Howe open letters, for example, I've never really felt like he's changed anything or really updated us as much as we'd like. I personally would say that the best way for the club to let us fans know is to come on the football club's most popular fan-led podcast, but that's a bit selfish of me. So yeah, it's one of those things that we always want more of, I suppose. But for me, Ollie, I'm not too sure what we're going to get from the top of the club to help us know truly what's going on.
Yeah, I think if you want to hear from the man who's making most of the decisions behind the scenes at the moment, you're not going to hear from Kia. So that's unlikely this summer. He mentions Stuart Webber there at Norwich. Obviously, is the ideal and does regular media interviews, and Nigel Howe appears on the radio every so often. But it's I think certainly Sam Baldock's interview a few weeks ago got a few fans concerned about. He mentioned the football's a murky industry and sort of pulled a few questions about what's going on behind the scenes, and certainly it's not all clear. But I mean, as you say, in an ideal world, we hear from them, and obviously, I think hearing Brian Teverden speak at the weekend as well on the most popular Reading fans podcast as well, has obviously got ears wagging and stuff like that. So you do want to hear from those behind the scenes, and I think we all do. But at the end of the day, I think as difficult as it is, it's perhaps not. You can't really expect that at Reading at the moment.
Yeah, I must say, Teverden didn't want to come on the Tilehurst when he was in the job. So that's always how it works, isn't it? When you're not in the job and you can talk freely. I think the only thing what we want or what we need really is for Dayonga and Geert Rajpin and Nigel Howe to have a sort of 3-man turning up on BBC Berkshire or Sky Sports or whatever TTE and have it out. But it's not going to happen. So I'm not going to spend too much time sort of lusting after it because I just don't think it's going to happen. Sam Michael said, do you think when Sky Sports start running cheesy adverts for the return of the season with fans, all actors, no interest in football, they'll include a Reading fan, or failing that, a montage trailer of great championship moments that don't include us conceding goals? I think this is kind of in reference to there was one of their sort of moments just before the half starts or whatever. There's a sort of Sky Sports thing pops up, and I remember one of them for a while was Jan Kermorgant looking really annoyed after we'd lost the playoff final. So hopefully there's maybe some good moments. So there's no leads in the championship this season, and I'm not sure Watford are going to have loads and loads of games. So maybe we will get more of a shout in terms of the Sky. Maybe they wanted Villa to go down because there's no one hugely popular now. Last couple of questions then of the mailbag. Greg Double asking, is this the most unlikable Reading squad of all time? I honestly feel nothing for this group of players. Swift is our best player, but if he went, I'd still be a bit meh. Same with Liam Moore, as Greg puts it. Always want the kids to shine, but otherwise a bit meh. In terms of unlikability, it's a hard one, isn't it? I think it's the success of the team always plays so much against it. I think there is a case to be made. It's difficult because Liam Moore running back or breaking into a swift stroll as he came back for Wigan scoring that last goal earlier in the season for that 3-0 defeat you mentioned would be the sign of a really unlikable team. But then Liam Moore's a nice guy. He turns up for fans. He does little podcast stuff, and he comes across as a nice bloke. So I don't have anything against Liam Moore as a likability. So I think it's a difficult one. Well, I don't know whether you'd say it's an unlikable Reading team.
I think it's a fair point to say that if the majority of this Reading side left, and I wouldn't really be too bothered in terms of their playing ability, it's probably the only players you'd sort of be disappointed perhaps to lose this summer are all the academy boys, Raphael, Andy Yeardom. Beyond that, no one else really in terms of that. Likeability-wise, I think someone mentioned it in a tweet. I think it was Alex Everson mentioned it, that side under Paul Clement at the start of 2018 to 19 for me will be the worst Reading side in terms of likability and ability that I've ever seen. I think that applies to the general mood overall. I've seen a lot of people, especially after the end of the season, we had losing Fleetings and about, that they said that this was the most disconnected they felt to a Reading side. And I think people have very, very short memories because the whole mood around the club at the start of 18-19 season was just toxic. It was I was completely apathetic. I think most people were, we didn't win until mid-September. That side will forever be worse than anything we're going to experience at the moment in terms of both results on the pitch and likability off it, I think.
Yeah, I think when you're record signing as a player that you just don't have any emotion for whatsoever is much worse than when you're record signing as a player like George Puskas, who at least draws a Marmite reaction of love-hate or whatever.
At least he scores goals, yeah.
Yeah, at least there is the emotion behind it rather than, as you say, an apathy, which is the worst. And it's totally relatable. I don't think it's something that we as football fans really connect with as often as we should, an apathy towards your team, because it's the worst feeling. It's the most damaging feeling. It's an Oscar Wilde quote. The worst thing is to not be talked about, basically. I'm paraphrasing that a little bit, but it is the sense that you just aren't really too bothered, and that's what we don't have now, I hope. to an extent. Final question then. Michael Wade saying, what are the reasons to be cheerful? Well, hold on to that thought, Michael, because that is where we're going to end the show after our next season preview, which we will jump over to now.
Keep up to date with all things Reading FC. Follow the Tilehurst End on Facebook and Twitter.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by ZCZ Films. Remember, if you want to get involved in sponsoring the show, drop us an email to thetilehurstend@gmail.com.
Okay, right. The 2020-21 season is only weeks away. Get excited. Because, I mean, let's face it, you think you're going to have a break from football. We've got the European Champions League, Europa League to come, and then some international football. And then Reading season kicks off again. It's not in front of me, but September 12th, please correct me if that's wrong, is penciled. Yeah, it's a Saturday, should be right. It's penciled in for the start of next season. There's a very interesting transfer window to be had in between that. So let's talk about that briefly first. Adam, welcome back. We've ended the technical issues, I hope. So who do you realistically think out of this team is actually going to attract any interest from rival clubs?
Yep, thank you for having me back. I think John Swift obviously already has. I think he'll continue to attract interest throughout the summer. There was rumours about Omar Richards as well leaving. He'll probably attract interest. Maybe even Michael Olise. His contract ends actually in 2022, so it's not that far away. It's 2 years. Rinomota, probably, and maybe even Yakumete and Raphael, because both of them have been very valuable to us in our squad this season. And then you look further afield, you look at Southwood and McNulty, who may attract interest from maybe Hamilton and maybe Hibernian again from McNulty. But I think the two players that perhaps might need to go probably won't attract the interest. I think Moore, I have nothing against him, but if his wages are really high, then I think it might be time to get rid of him. But who's going to take him on the wages that he's currently on? I'm not sure who will. And then Sam Walker as well, because I think the ideal thing for us would be to have Southwood and Boyce Clark in with Raphael, so that them two academy graduates can learn from Raphael. But I don't think we'll be able to get anyone to take Walker off our hands, even though he did very well actually in the FA Cup replay against Cardiff City, and that can't be ignored.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned Mark McNulty. Mark Bowen says that he's going to be in amongst the first team next season, or certainly for the summer. So we've got plenty of strikers. Sonny Aluko is another player that you could add to that list of players that probably need to go that aren't. So just going to have to put up with it. I think it's the last year of his contract. Unless a team from like the MLS or something comes and offers like a loan, and they won't be paying all his wages or anything like it. Maybe he was injured. I don't know for sure, but maybe he does have a role in the first team, but it's not going to attract any interest, is he? Ollie, any players, anyone you'd add to that maybe is potentially going to leave? Andy Yeardom is one I would throw into that list as a player who has a lot of value in this transfer market.
I think you've covered most of the squad between the two of you there, to be fair. I think, as I said in the mailbag, that there's not really that many members of this squad that I would be unhappy to see leave, if I'm totally honest. Apart from Raphael and the Yeardom and most of the academy lads, to be honest. Certainly the wage bill needs decreasing. So as Alan mentioned, Liam Moore certainly should be trying to get off the books, as you mentioned, Sonny Aluko. It's just about cutting down that wage bill because, as we know, it is astronomically high. £225 spent on wages for every £100 of income, which is an all-time championship high. So that will have been helped by the departures of the likes of Chris Gunter and Gareth McCleary, but it needs to be cut down even more. So certainly those on higher wages, you would hope. In terms of players who will attract interest, again, I'd agree. Obviously, John Swift has attracted interest already, and he is on might well because he is a very good championship right back. Ovie Ejaria, I wouldn't be surprised if Ovie Ejaria, if we did manage to get a deal across the line to sign him, and then sold him on straight away, much the same way that Benica Fobe. I'm not sure which teams off the top of my head was involved in that deal, but he signed, was it for Stoke almost straight away or Wolves straight away?
Went to Bristol City, didn't they?
Yeah, and then they sold him straight away. So it might be something similar like that with Oviajaria. But yeah, there's not too many players that I wouldn't be too unhappy to see leave, to be honest.
No, and in terms of incomings, if I was to ask you for a couple of positions that are the most important to invest in, off the top of my head, a good defensive midfielder would be a good idea. We've signed a box-to-box midfielder, which is interesting because if you look at how Mark Bowen describes Josh Lowen, basically describing Andy Vinamata. Hopefully he's got a plan. Sounds like someone that Mark Bowen wanted. I'll just sit on that for now. The jury's going to be out for a little while. Otherwise, in terms of positions that I think we have to invest in, probably need a left back. We've only got one now. And with Blackett and Obita going, and need some wingers, really. We don't have any natural wingers left. Masika's gone back to Beijing. McCleary's gone. Aluko's not really an actual winger. Mo Barrow's gone. Unless I'm missing people, I don't think we've got anyone left, Ollie.
No, we don't. And certainly if Mark Byrne wants to play wingers, as he has done quite a lot, he's shunted Oviajaria out wide. He's played Richards out wide. He's played Elise out wide. And none of them are natural wingers. So, yeah, you'd certainly hope that would be almost top of the list if Mark Byrne does want to play a system that includes wingers. He doesn't have to. But certainly if he wants to carry on playing that way, I don't want to be carrying on seeing, players being played out of position. We need to be playing players in their natural position next season, which is quite a big problem this year, to be honest, because, Mark Bowen inherited a Jose Gomez side that had got players in and that had sold players. Mo Barrow was sold because Jose Gomez didn't like playing wingers. Mark Byrne comes in and wants to play wingers, and you're stuck with a problem where he doesn't really have any at the club. So sign the players that fit the system. And if you can do that, then that's fine. I don't want to be seeing players being played out of position next season.
No, that's fair enough. And what are your two positions then, Adam, that really need a focus on?
Oh, I don't know if I could go with two. I think I totally agree with you that the three positions we need are a defensive midfielder, we need some wingers, and we need a left back. Now, with the defensive midfielder, we need someone to sit in front of the back four, which, from what I've heard, Laurent doesn't do that. I think Rinomhota and Laurent sound pretty similar, and I think it's good to have two of them in that type of position, but we do need someone to sit in front of that back four. As you say, we need wingers. I think similarly to the way that Sam Baldock gives us a different option up front and gives us the option to play two up front, I think the wingers as well give us a different option. I don't think we need to replace Mo Barrow directly, but we need to replace the kind of the skill that he had and what he brought to the team, because he kept us up pretty much on his own in the 17-18 season. And even when you look back to our promotion season in 11-12, the wingers, Kebe and McAnuff, they were the vital point of our team. And then the last position for left back, I think we definitely need one, considering that not only Tyler Blackett and Jordan Obita have gone, and we've got to consider Romani Medford-Smith as well, and he's gone. So we only have Omar Richards, and then behind him, I think, is Imari Samuels. But that's it pretty much. So it's almost certain that we will sign a left back. Whether he'll be the first choice left back, Omar Richards, I'm not so sure. He might be second choice, but that will be for Mark Bowen to decide. So he's going to have a bit of a headache in terms of that. But yeah, I was surprised that Medford Smith wasn't kept, just purely for that reason that Obita and Blackett were likely to go.
Let's go and sign an Ian Hart style left back. That's what I want. A proper veteran, maybe an attacking sort of left back. That was a successful jaunt. Let's kind of do that again. That's where maybe we can go for left back. Let's have last couple of points then, because this podcast recording, sadly, as I said, there's technical difficulties, has gone on for almost as long as the season has by now. But a quick fire question then for both of you. Ollie, if you want to go first, not where do you think, what it is where you think, but not where do you want us to finish, but where do you think we will finish?
It's tough because right now the squad probably does look weaker than it did this season, so you'd have to probably say lower than 14th, 15th. If we can get the right players in, then I'm vaguely optimistic. I don't think we'll push for the playoffs. I think we probably need to to lower our expectations, it's probably going to be another season of sort of plodding around in mid-table. But I'm going to be optimistic and say we'll finish higher than we did this season. I'll say 11th.
Adam?
I don't know if I can really answer that, but I guess I will. Because there could be a new director of football, there could be a new manager. I can't see the owners being very patient if Bowen doesn't get results on the board. We're definitely going to have a new squad anyway before the end of next season. I am going to go probably with 13th. I think we might make progress on this season, but I don't think we'll be pushing anywhere near for playoffs. I don't think we'll even be in the top half of the table, but we might be close to there. But I'm going to go with 13th.
That's really useful, actually, because I was going to go 12th. So I'm going to split in between you, 11th, 12th and 13th for the will finishes for next season, which at this point I think is not too optimistic. I don't think that's too, that is pretty nice and middle of the road, really, because it's not pessimistic to think that this Reading team is not on the verge of glory. I don't think many people are really going to make that argument successfully. But having said that, I am determined to end this season and end this show because, God, I think every time I've led a season review for this podcast, it's been absolutely miserable. So I'm determined to finish with reasons to be cheerful, and I will give my reasons to be cheerful to begin with. And that is just a couple of stats really around this season in comparison to the last few seasons. This is our second highest league finish in the last 6 seasons, which is bonkers and shows how bad we've been, but still good. It's also the second best scoring season in the last 6. This season was our best Diesel League, best league defensive display since 2014-15, and it was also our best combined cup runs since 2015-16. So we've been bad, but this one wasn't as bad, is basically my reasons to be cheerful. And I think that the mood around the club does reflect that. It has been lifted just a couple notches and sets us up for hopefully a good summer. Adam, what are your reasons to be cheerful?
I've got 4. I think we've got to ask the question, have we finally woken up and smelt the coffee? And I think the answer to that is yes. When we look at the accounts and that sort of thing, I think as a club, we've finally realised that we need to cut back. And the second one is we now have the chance to reduce the wage bill. I can't believe that the wage bill has been reported as nearly 40 million, which is more than double our income, which is just ridiculous, really. The third one, there's a chance really to make McIntyre, Elise, Osho, Richards, them sort of players, the focal point of the team. And I think obviously all of them are academy graduates, and it'll give us that real sense of identity. I'm sorry if you heard the motorbikes in the background there.
That's fun.
And finally, Ron Gourlay is nowhere near our club. Just listening to that Brian Teverden podcast, it's clear to see what damage he's done. So thank God he's not here. And I think I'll end on that.
Olly, what are your reasons to be cheerful heading into the summer?
I think the fact that next season is a clean slate. It sounds quite basic, but we always have optimism going into a new campaign, and the fact that I think next season will be very different to this one. First and foremost, in terms of the squad, as Adam mentioned, that there's a real chance, to build this side around a sort of real nucleus of young players. I think the likes of McIntyre, Elise, Richards, Renamotta are only getting better. The squad will be smaller. I think next season, we won't have Chris Gunter and Gareth McCleary in the side for the first time in 8 years, which they've both been fantastic servants to the club, but they've not helped matters on the pitch much the last couple of years. So it's going to be a different squad. I think Marc Bowen knows where he wants to take this squad. Yes, he might not have a sort of clear defined style of play, but I think Marc Bowen knows what he needs to do to get the squad where it needs to be. Whether he can do that and whether he's, as I said, the right man to take us forward long term, I don't know. But I think he knows how to fix these problems, and hopefully he can. So it's going to be an interesting season. As I say, it's going to be an interesting summer. We're not going to be able to spend the money that we have done the last few years, but perhaps that is a good thing because we can go back, hopefully, to that Reading way. We speak about it so often of getting a good team spirit together. I think Mark Byrne is the right man to foster that team spirit. We spoke about earlier about him knowing how to make teams hard to beat and wanting to make teams hard to beat. That's crucial to this side, and Byrne knows how to do that. Bringing in, Josh Lauren. I can't say too much about him, but he's a classic Reading signing, I suppose, in many ways. And the fact that he's come from the lower leagues, he's come on a free, and hopefully does very well. So we're heading in the right direction, I think, off the pitch and on it. That might well come back to bite me this time next year when we're relegated to League One. But I think certainly we're heading in the right direction.
Well, all that is left to do then is to thank you guys for coming on. And Adam, thank you very much for persevering with the technicalities tonight.
That's all right. I think my podcast performance this episode has been pretty much opposite to how Reading have performed this season. All right at the start and the end, but woeful and full of technical difficulties in the middle. But let's just hope for a better season in the next campaign. It's been a pleasure.
And Ollie, as ever, a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And I thoroughly enjoy looking back on a difficult season, but ultimately one that was, as you mentioned, the best in a number of seasons. So, yeah, thank you very much.
And it was exactly that, a difficult season in a large sense of the word, a difficult season to be a fan, a difficult season to be a player, a difficult season for so many reasons, and Reading have come through it relatively unscathed. We will look like a very different team next season, but hopefully the club and the future of the club will be intact as we look towards what just might, be a relatively successful season next year as Reading struggle and forever paw and claw their way towards some semblance of success. Thank you ever so much for persevering with us this season, whether you're an occasional listener, a devout Reading fan, or someone who puts the hand in the pocket for the Patreon. We always appreciate it. We would not bother turning on our Zoom calls and meeting up and everything like that for an hour and doing a podcast if people didn't listen to it and didn't appreciate it. So that's always thank you very much for doing that. Thank you to everyone who gets in touch for the mailbag on the Twitter and on the Facebook and on the Gmail, and just for people reading the website as well. It is the only reason we do it, and we hope to be doing it once again for you next season. We'll hope as we've already brought you an interview with Brian Teverden just this week. We'll hopefully have a few little snippets for you over the summer. But until then, we will be seeing you maybe next season and previewing us for a chance to do it all again, because there is always that next season and always that next chance of success. Let's hope Reading have a good summer. And as ever, a wholehearted come on you arse.
You smile, funny how the crimes always leave a trail, even when it's